Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to tackle this one belief that holds so many of us back, the idea that innovation is just for a select few. We're going to show you how to unlock that innovator inside you and build what's called creative confidence.
All right, let's kick things off with a question that honestly, most of us find surprisingly tough to answer. Do you see yourself as a creative person? It's so easy to think that creativity is reserved for artists or genius inventors. But here's a thought. What if it's not some magical gift you're born with? What if it's actually a skill, one that anyone, and I mean anyone, can learn and master?
So, here's our game plan for this explainer. We're going to demystify innovation in 4 key steps. First, we'll look at reframing our mindset. Then, we'll stock up our toolkit with some practical problem-solving tools. After that, we'll uncover the hidden sources where great ideas actually come from. And finally, the big one, building the creative confidence to bring those ideas to life.
Okay, let's get right into it. The foundation of all this? It's your mindset. Seriously, this one thing can be your biggest roadblock or your greatest superpower.
So think of it like this. On one side, you've got the fixed mindset. This is the voice in your head that says, hey, my talents, my smarts, they're set in stone. I've got what I've got, and that's it. But then over here, you have the growth mindset. This is the belief that, you know what, with dedication and some hard work, I can actually develop my abilities. And guess where innovators live? Yep, right here. And you can see how these two mindsets lead to totally different ways of approaching things, right? Traditional thinking is always hunting for that one, single, right answer. It needs a clear roadmap. But innovative thinking, the kind fueled by a growth mindset, is all about exploring tons of alternatives and having the guts to pave a new road when there isn't one.
Okay, so let's say we're on board with this whole growth mindset thing. Awesome. Now what? Well, you need a toolkit, right? So let's look at a couple of really powerful frameworks that help innovators give some structure to their creativity.
One of the most powerful tools out there is called design thinking. And it's not some rigid step-by-step formula. It's more of a flexible approach that always starts with empathy. I mean, really deeply understanding the people you're trying to solve a problem for. From there, you just generate a ton of ideas, you build quick and dirty prototypes to test them out, and you learn from what people say. The key here? It's all about action and not being afraid to try, fail, and try again.
And for that very first step, defining the problem, here's a brilliant little tool. It's called a Fishbone diagram. Some people call it an Ishikawa diagram, named after the guy who invented it. Basically, it lets you visually map out every single potential cause of an issue. This way, you make sure you're fixing the real problem, the root cause, not just slapping a Band-Aid on the symptoms.
And you can totally build one of these yourself. It's just 6 simple steps. You start with the problem itself. That's the head of the fish. Then you brainstorm the big categories of causes, and those become the main bones. From there, you just keep drilling down, getting more and more specific until you can look at the whole picture, find the real root cause, and then build your plan.
All right, so we've got the mindset, we've got a couple of tools in our belt, but that big question remains, where do these breakthrough ideas actually come from? It's almost never a single eureka moment. Instead, there are actually 7 specific places you can look for opportunities.
First up, the good old unexpected. Think about this. The microwave oven exists because an engineer had a candy bar melt in his pocket while he was working near some radar equipment. Total accident. But he was curious enough to stop and think, what's going on here? He saw an opportunity.
Next up, innovation loves the incongruous, which is just a fancy word for that gap between the way things are and the way we feel they should be. You know that feeling of wanting amazing restaurant food, but the reality is you're stuck at home on your couch? That gap, that's exactly where companies like DoorDash and Uber Eats popped up and built massive industries.
The third source is all about spotting a weak link in a process. Before Polaroid came along, photography had this huge, frustrating bottleneck, waiting forever to get your film developed. Edwin Land saw that frustration, that weak link, and boom, he invented instant photography. Totally changed the game.
All right, number 4, huge, sweeping changes in an entire industry or market. Just look at the car industry. When the world started shifting towards fuel-efficient cars and then electric vehicles, that wasn't just a small change. It was a tidal wave that opened the door for innovators like Tesla to come in and challenge companies that have been on top for 100 years.
Demographics, changes in population, culture, trends, that's an absolute goldmine for ideas. I mean, just think about the rise of social media influencers. 15 years ago, that wasn't even a job. But our culture changed, how we communicate changed, who
who we trust changed, and it created a whole new market out of thin air.
Sometimes, and this is a big one, innovation isn't about inventing something new at all. It's just about changing your perception. Early computers, they were seen as these giant, complicated beasts for big corporations. Steve Jobs looked at the exact same technology, but he saw something completely different. He saw a simple, personal tool for everyone. And that shift in perception, it literally launched the personal computer revolution.
And last but not least, we have new knowledge. Take the Wright brothers. They didn't invent the engine, and they didn't invent the glider. But they took new knowledge about aerodynamics and combined it with existing mechanical know-how, and by putting those two things together, they created something the world had never seen before, a plane that could actually fly.
Okay, we've got the mindset down, we have the tools, we even know where to look for great opportunities, but there is one final, absolutely crucial ingredient that makes it all work. It's the spark.
You know, Steve Jobs, who, by the way, was not an engineer or a programmer, he understood this on a deep level. He knew that the biggest thing holding people back from changing the world isn't a lack of technical skill. It's the belief that you even can.
And that really brings us to the million-dollar question, doesn't it? Is this ability to innovate something you're just born with or not? Can it actually be learned and developed? Well, the answer lies in this idea called creative confidence, a term from the founders of the design firm IDEO. And it's really simple. It's two things: having the ability to come up with new ideas and, maybe even more importantly, having the courage to actually try them out.
Look, our biggest enemy here is almost always fear, right? It shows up in a few classic ways. The fear of failing, the fear of what other people will think, the fear of the unknown, the fear of losing control. These are the walls we build in our own minds that stop us from even trying. So here's the thing. The goal isn't to be fearless. That's impossible. The goal is to act despite the fear. And that action, that courage, it starts with a simple, powerful belief in your own ability to make a change. Which, if you think about it, brings us right back to where we started, your mindset.
So let's end with that full thought from Steve Jobs because it's just so powerful. The world we live in, it wasn't built by some race of super geniuses. It was built by people who were no smarter than you. So the only real question left to ask is, what are you going to choose to influence, to change, to build?